Welcome back to the Two-Way Report. You'll hear it everywhere. California Governor Newsom, in an interview with a CNN reporter last January, said large capacity clips are just insane. There's just no justification, period, full stop. It's insane. These people are perpetuating lunacy. When NMHB 50, a bill that aims to ban large capacity magazines in New Mexico, was introduced, some dumb reporter said a large capacity magazine holds 10 or more rounds. Another said large capacity magazines hold more than 12 rounds. And then there's New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg, who said in an interview with an ABC reporter, if you haven't hit the deer with 3 shots, you're a pretty lousy shot. That deer deserves to get away. What a FUDD. And last, but definitely not least, there's the POTUS. Brandon. In an interview, he said, my legislation says there can be no more than 8 bullets in a magazine. Are these idiots even aware of the sheer stupidity and foolishness of this anti-Second Amendment ideology they're pushing? So, I've been reading some pro-Second Amendment news lately, and it has come to my attention that the pronoun-loving shooter in Nashville fired a shocking 152 rounds during the attack before the police was able to neutralize her. Again, that is 152 rounds. The Metro Police's investigation has revealed that the mentally deranged, murderous nihilist identified as Audrey Hale fired a total of 152 rounds from the moment she entered the school until officers put an end to her rampage. Out of the total, 126 rounds were fired from a rifle and 26 rounds from a handgun. Despite that, we are surrounded by idiotic anti-Second Amendment liberal progressivists in the government who insist that individuals should only carry 8 to 10 rounds on their person for self-defense. It is truly mind-boggling that the Nashville mass shooter fired a staggering 152 rounds during the horrific incident. This only goes to show that magazine capacity limits are useless as far as preventing mass shootings. Let's be real here. The person did not have a single magazine that has 152 rounds. She had to reload, so she brought spare magazines. So, it's not about magazine capacity, but rather about the number of magazines she had at her disposal. And yet, some lawmakers pass laws that restrict the number of rounds law-abiding citizens can carry for self-defense, limiting them to as few as 10 rounds in their defensive handgun. But does anyone really think that a person intent on committing mass murder will abide by such laws? Well, they say to themselves, oh, I can only have 10 rounds in my gun, so I better not shoot more than that. Hell no. It's stupid to think that a law-abiding citizen being limited to 10 rounds in their gun somehow makes us safer. It just puts us at a disadvantage, especially when we are faced with someone who has already planned their attack and has access to multiple magazines. It is absurd, if not downright pathetic, to suggest that a person who has the intent to commit mass murder would abide by the law limiting the number of rounds they can have in their firearm. The gun control lobby and politicians like Let's Go Brandon may argue that limiting the number of rounds a person can have in their gun would make us safer, but in reality, it only puts law-abiding citizens at a disadvantage. This limitation does not deter criminals who will simply bring multiple magazines or firearms to carry out their violent acts. Even if there were only 10-round magazines available, it is still possible to carry multiple magazines, which would nullify any supposed safety benefit of the limitation. It's important to consider the practicality and efficacy of gun control measures before implementing them. It's incredulous to think that anyone would believe that a person who is planning to commit a mass shooting would be limited to only one magazine with 10 rounds. It's preposterous to suggest that they won't have multiple magazines on hand, and the idea that limiting magazine capacity to 10 rounds will prevent such crimes is absurd. If the next shooter has 30 magazines with 10 rounds each, what will the government's response be? Will they decide to further restrict citizens' access to firearms and impose even more restrictive limits on the number of magazines that they can own? This line of thinking is flawed and has led to a state of mass confusion and hysteria. The current gun laws are a prime example of mass euphoric stupidity, and we really should find a way to stop it. The issue with limiting magazine capacity to a low number like 8 to 10 rounds is that it places law-abiding citizens in a disadvantaged position. The shooter who committed the heinous act in Nashville was able to fire 152 rounds because they had time to plan and prepare, bringing multiple guns and magazines. Meanwhile, regular people who carry firearms for protection are left to react to the situation with only a limited number of rounds in their firearm. As individuals who take the responsibility of owning firearms seriously, we understand that our safety and the safety of our loved ones can be threatened at any given moment. The reality is that we don't know when we will need to use our firearms for protection, and we cannot predict how many rounds we will need in such situations. It is not just about defending against a mass shooter, as there are other life-threatening scenarios such as a home invasion or robbery. Therefore, we should be allowed to carry as many rounds as we deem necessary to defend ourselves and our families. Limiting magazine capacity could potentially put us in a dangerous situation where we may not have enough ammunition to defend ourselves effectively. As responsible gun owners, we need to have the ability to make informed decisions and carry the appropriate amount of rounds to ensure our safety. Restricting magazine capacity is a reactive approach to the problem of gun violence, and it fails to address the root cause of the issue. The real problem lies with the individuals who are willing to commit acts of violence, not the number of rounds in a magazine. By enacting laws that only serve to restrict law-abiding citizens, we are punishing the responsible gun owners who have done nothing wrong. Instead, we need to take a proactive approach by addressing mental health issues, enforcing existing laws, and increasing law enforcement presence in areas that are often targeted by mass shooters, such as schools, theaters, and other gun-free zones. It is important to remember that the vast majority of gun owners are responsible and law-abiding citizens who take their rights and responsibilities seriously. By focusing on the root causes of gun violence, we can create a safer society for everyone. Also, situations where someone may have to defend themselves with a firearm are often unpredictable and can escalate pretty quickly. That's why it's crucial to have the ability to carry as many rounds as necessary to protect oneself in such situations. It is unreasonable to expect people to know in advance how many rounds they might need to defend themselves effectively. Limiting the number of rounds to an artificially low number of 8 or 10 or even 7 is a hindrance to personal safety and self-defense. It only serves to make people feel more vulnerable and less safe. It is time to move beyond these arbitrary ammo capacity limitations and empower people to make their own choices when it comes to self-defense. If you're not a Second Amendment advocate, but you're not an anti-gun progressivist libtard either, maybe just someone who's in the middle, then it's important to pause and reflect before you blindly support certain policies or laws. Are you voting for someone or something because you genuinely believe it will make a difference, or are you just doing it to feel like you're doing something? It is a crucial question to ask, because while it may seem like you're doing something, the reality could be quite different. We all need to consider whether the actions we take are truly helpful or whether they could end up doing more harm than good. Unfortunately, many of us don't take the time to ask ourselves these tough questions. It's much easier to simply say, let's do something, without really thinking about what that something is or what the unintended consequences might be. So, let's not be afraid to question what we're being told and to think critically about the choices we make. We humans have been the dominant species for a very long time. We've been here long enough to realize that some ideas may sound good on the surface, but can have significant issues down the line. While I can understand why there are idiots everywhere who want to limit the number of rounds in firearms we carry, there's simply not enough data to even suggest that limiting everyone to 8 or 10 rounds would make America, or our schools for that matter, a safer place. Even if we were to limit the round capacity, it doesn't account for the possibility that some nutjob may have multiple magazines, rendering the limitation moot. It's unrealistic to base our ability to protect ourselves on the hope that the attacker may have to reload, leaving us with only a few precious seconds to act. This is why magazine capacity limitations are, simply put, stupid. We cannot rely on arbitrary limits dictated by some piece of legislation to protect ourselves from those who are intent on doing us harm. Instead, we should focus on responsible gun ownership and education, as well as implementing targeted and effective solutions that address the root causes of violence. That's all I have for you in this video. Please help our channel grow by clicking on the like, share, and subscribe buttons, and tap that notification bell too while you're at it, just so you're always updated on our future videos. Thanks, and have a good one.